Cyber and Education podcast series. Thanks for joining our third episode. Here we'll kind of host some new cybersecurity vendors each week. We'll give them some time to talk about their products, as well as give you an opportunity to learn more about them and how the products work in the education space. As some of you may know, each week we'll be hosting a new vendor. By the time the series is over, we hope that we'll have provided you at least the tools you need and the messaging you need to be more successful in this space. In just a few minutes, we'll introduce our special guest. But let's talk really quick about why cybersecurity is so important in the education space today. Cybersecurity is such an important aspect of education today because, one, there's devices everywhere. The threats are more real. They're larger threats. We have to take them a bit more serious now than we used to. But also the number of school districts hit by ransomware just in 2022 alone represented somewhere around 1,980 schools. That's almost double the amount of K-12 schools compromised in 2021. And this year, the trend set to dwarf last year's numbers. So if you can imagine, it's becoming even larger and larger. The threat is really, really huge. And for those of you who don't know, what COSIN is, COSIN stands for Consortium of School Networking. They put out an EdTech leadership survey every year. And I would say the vast majority of schools are members of COSIN. They're one of the largest advocacy groups for K-12 education out there. And they put out a big survey every year, and they get thousands upon thousands of responses back to them. And one of the biggest things we saw from their EdTech leadership survey this past year was that, they called it cybersecurity's K-12 5-alarm fire, right? What they found was that 77% of school districts listed cybersecurity as a major concern. Only 21% of the districts had a full-time equivalent employee dedicated to network security, not even full cybersecurity, right? Most of the schools just had cybersecurity protection as a part-time responsibility. And most of them were just relying on end user trainings. We all know how that works. Don't click this, click that, that type of thing. So school districts have become such a big key target for cyber attacks. And a lot of the reason for that is kids, right? These kids don't have apps in their phone that tell them when an account's opened in their name or that someone's logged into something they shouldn't, right? Like we adults have. So when we talk about cybersecurity and education, we have to tie that in with student data privacy as well, right? And cybersecurity and student data privacy just go hand in hand, right? Over 49 states now have introduced over 500 student data privacy bills, and they continue to introduce about 100 bills a year, right? So from a school district's perspective, they're responsible for keeping the kids safe and not just physically safe. It's a very different ballgame compared to higher ed. Because you're dealing with young children, right? And children have so many advocacy groups these days that parents, teachers, school boards, media, they have advocacy groups they didn't even know they had, and probably a good chance that they didn't really want to have, right? But at the end of the day, they're there. It's so important, in fact, that the Office of CISA, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, put out a cybersecurity toolkit specifically for K-12 education to try and help schools kind of get more up to date and start dealing with cybersecurity a little better. So with all that, you all can see why student data privacy goes in hand in hand with cybersecurity and why cybersecurity is on every school district's mind these days, right? So today we're joined by a special guest, Stacia Hurley. She's the Principal Product Marketing Manager of Data Protection for Barracuda. So welcome, Stacia and Barracuda, to our podcast, and thanks for participating.
Thanks so much, Will. It's great to be invited.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you here. So I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of start off with some questions. For those here who are hearing about Barracuda for the first time, could you tell us a little about the company and the solutions that it has to offer?
Sure. So Barracuda is a security company. So we sell solutions that protect all aspects of organizations, everything from email protection, security training, credential protection, network and application security. And then we also have a SOC offering with Barracuda XDR. And then one of the things that a lot of our customers really love about us is our tech support, because you can get live tech support 24/7 by 365. And customers really like the fact that our solutions sort of encompass their entire IT organization.
That's awesome. So I do have to admit up front, I was a huge Barracuda as a former end user and CTO of a school district. I used Barracuda, so I'm a little bit, partial there. But So, Sasha, could you tell us a little bit about how Barracuda plays in the education space? Like, what specific products apply to that space, and where have you found the most success in education?
Yeah. So, as you started out this particular session, right, you were talking about how concerned everybody is about ransomware. And that's certainly what we have found as well. In a recent study that we did, customers are very, very worried about it. And they're also really worried about not having the expertise to protect themselves from ransomware and respond to the ransomware attacks if they do happen. Um, so, customers are trying to protect themselves, and what they're really looking for is defense in depth. What we found with a lot of customers is that they have a situation where they're maybe protecting one aspect of their organization, like maybe they have email protection in place or something like that, which is sort of like, yeah, you have the front door is locked, but you forgot about the windows on the side of the house and the back door is open. You really need to protect all aspects of your organization in order to really have, a true solution, especially given the amount and types of attacks that we're seeing right now, especially on education customers. So, what we're really finding is that, it's protecting your network, applications, preventing lateral movement, monitoring your systems for attack, and then being able to recover in the case of the worst happening and there actually being a ransomware attack. And I think you're absolutely right to sort of point out that we have a situation now that's especially horrible. I'm sure that people saw what happened, in Oakland and in Minneapolis, where they had a situation where it wasn't only just the ransomware attack, it was the data exfiltration. So the data was stolen, and then they didn't want to pay the attackers. And so what the attackers did then was actually post the extremely sensitive data, which was about, for instance, medical details and things like that about the actual underage students. And then they published how to access this information, so that the information was readily accessible. If you wanted to find out something about what was happening in that particular school or even that particular student, you would be able to go up online and find it. And that, of course, opens up the school districts to things like lawsuits. So we're really finding that, school districts need to be a lot more cognizant of the risks of not protecting themselves against these attacks. We have a situation where, again, not having the expertise of being able to deal with these types of attacks is really a problem. And almost all of our products play a very strong role in helping protect customers from these attacks, and also helping, protect the organization from some of the downside of not protecting themselves.
Thanks, Stacey. And I think you brought up a few points there that I immediately kind of caught on. And one is that student data being used like it is. It's interesting how each one of those student data privacy records is worth so much money on the black market, right? Two, they get the data and they sit on the data. They don't typically just use it right away, right? They wait just a year or two till nobody's looking. Then all of a sudden, the kid graduates, high school with 2 cars and a mortgage they didn't even know about. I mean, it's such a big thing. And then the school district lawsuits. And I think we finally reached this point with, especially in K-12 education, where the district, the school board, the community, no one's as forgiving as they used to be about it, right? By now, they understand these things are there and they need a solution, and they need a good partner to manage that solution so that so they can maintain the integrity of that student data.
Absolutely, yes. Because one information like your social security is out there number, you have that throughout your entire life. And you can have, again, you're right, the credit card, the credit risks to that person, or even just having it where, something you did in third grade, showing up years later in a way that is not good. That's also completely unacceptable. as well as, of course, there's all kinds of implications too with, health records all of a sudden showing up in a public way. That's a huge concern.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about every student record that they have access to also has access to all their parents' records and anyone else that they have as a part of it. So it grows exponentially and quickly.
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Stacia, could you give the audience an example of a case study where, a Barracuda product or solution was used to solve a problem for K-12 or
Sure.
higher ed entity, either one?
Sure. So a good example of this was when we worked with Judson Independent School District. They are a district in Texas. And in that case, Lacey Gorst came in as assistant superintendent of technology for the school district. And then she's there for like less than a month, and all of a sudden they get hit by a ransomware attack. And if the timing was terrible because it was right before school started up at the beginning of the year. So it's in, basically right around this time of year, right? And she discovered that they were not in a good position at all to be able to deal with this attack, because the backup that they were using was a tape backup, which was attacked during the ransomware attack. It actually was attacked, and they tried to delete it. It was a mess. And not only that, but they didn't have anything in place. So they were actually using a gateway product, but the problem with the gateway product was it had no type of phishing protection on it at all. They also had a situation where, they were not even on M365. So the entire district was in really severe need of updating overall. And here's the other thing that's really pretty sad about it. They probably wouldn't have done it if it hadn't been for this ransomware attack. So often we find that people don't actually react until they really do have a problem. And then all of a sudden the funding becomes available. So, that's an unfortunate truth. So anyway, they found that the recovery time was incredibly painful, and that a lot of the equipment that they had was useless, and they had to replace it. They ended up with moving to M365, and then they were able to use Barracuda email protection, which has things like phishing protection in there. It also has a training component that's so incredibly important, especially where schools are concerned, because even the staff, they may not be the most tech savvy. And so being able to have it where it's able to go in and say, oh, okay, it looks like you maybe didn't understand that you weren't supposed to click on this link. Let's actually figure out how to get you trained for this, so that you will become more knowledgeable about what to avoid in the future. They also didn't have, as I mentioned before, they were using tape backup. And so they went with Barracuda backup, which was, to protect their on-prem data. And then they also went with Barracuda cloud-to-cloud backup, which was able to specifically protect their Microsoft 365 environment. And this was just to get them kind of started. This is what they started with. And then they began to look at things like, the network protection and the application protection, and moving more to a zero trust solution. And the reason why all of this is very important, I think, for your audience to understand, is that when you choose to go with Barracuda, you're not just selling a point solution. You are becoming a valued partner for that customer to help them design an entire security solution for their environment that's going to work for them. So you're getting the most out of that particular lead while helping that partner, helping that customer really design something that's going to work for them.
Great. Thanks, Stacia. And I think again, you brought up some really important stuff. I mean, and I think these are things, I think when you look at the element of cybersecurity, and especially in K-12 education, you may be dealing with a large school district that completely understands what they're doing. You may be dealing with a medium district that has a pretty good idea what they're doing. But there are so many smaller districts out there that don't know what they're doing. And a lot of times they're afraid to expose themselves and show that they don't know much, right? But most of those districts don't realize like how long that backup and recovery process takes, or whether they even have a good point to start backing up from and recovering from, right? Even the loss of learning that can happen, during a data breach like that can take months to recover from. And the cost, the cost that become a part of that is huge as well. So it's so important, I think, for the audience to know that, when you're selling a cybersecurity solution, you're not just selling a cybersecurity solution. There's a why behind the buy. And the why behind that buy is it all has to do with, number one, making sure that student data privacy is secure. Number two, knowing where to back up from, having a good backup recovery point, because it's not a matter of if, but when. And then trying to control that loss of learning and the costs associated with trying to get back up and running in on that part. You mentioned earlier about the tape backups and stuff, and I think that's an important part because you've all seen those districts that have their server sitting right next to their backup server, probably on the concrete somewhere, and in the same room, there's fire or whatever. So it's really important that when you're talking to your customers, I think it's important that you keep those things in mind, because a lot of those smaller and small to mid-sized districts just don't quite understand what they're up against these days. A lot of times they're an IT director that was hired or just kind of came up through the ranks. Maybe they don't have any specific training, or maybe some of them in some cases are a media specialist that doubles as the IT director because, or a coach, they just knew more about it than anyone else, So
Yeah.
so great area. So last question, Stacia, that I have for you is, does Barracuda have any like authorization programs, deal registrations, demos, or training, anything else you might want the audience to know about today?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that's really great is when you sign up to become a Barracuda partner, we are able to get you, there's a partner portal that's really great where you can go in and get a hold of all manner of resources. The other thing that's also really great is, for instance, when we were working with Judson, we were it wasn't only just a sales rep, there was actually a solution architect that was able to help design something that was going to work for that customer. So somebody really knows the technology behind it and is able to put together an entire plan, because as you mentioned, a lot of the people that you're going to be dealing with, they don't have access to like a consultant or anything like that to figure out, okay, what's in place and what do you need to add? And that's something that we were able to do with the partners. So when you are working with us, you are typically working with, multiple people on our side to help you design for that customer the best possible solution for them. On the marketing side, we have all kinds of programs and assets like campaigns in a box. If you want to be able to run a particular campaign for your area around ransomware, we would have something like that. We would have something that would be designed for particular products. If you feel like one of our products in particular would work really well for you, we have campaigns for that as well. There's also dedicated partner resources in terms of OCMs that are able to work with the partners to help them figure out, okay, you have this in place. We can help you. This is where we think you'd have the best bang for your buck and stuff like that. So both the partner portal plus the live person that you can talk to, because so many times now it's like, no, you can't get a hold of anybody. It's like, oh, go to the internet and figure it out. And it's like, no, I have specific questions. I want to be able to ask somebody, and Barracuda definitely has that. So I would encourage everyone who is listening to come to Barracuda and become a partner and be able to get a hold, be able to work with us to be able to develop the best solutions for your prospects, as well as being able to take advantage of some of the marketing programs and other resources that we have for partners to avail themselves of.
Great. Thanks, Stacia. So as you all can see, you're not in this alone. I mean, if you're interested in a solution, if you're planning to have a talk with the district, you have people that can stand right beside you and walk this, take this journey with you. And once you do it a couple of times, you'll be a pro, right? So obviously, cybersecurity is a major growing area in education, and districts are at a point where they can't afford to ignore it or not take it serious anymore. And unfortunately, there's a lot of smaller districts we just talked about who it's not a matter of them ignoring it. It's a matter of they just don't know. They don't know how to operate. Or they need your help is what they need to really kind of take them to that next place. So Stacia, I want to thank you and Barracuda for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know you have plenty to do today. But thank you so very much for joining us today and being a part of this cyber series.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So, folks, if you have any questions about Barracuda or just questions on cybersecurity, please reach out to Anthony Manine, anthony.manine@tdsynnex.com. And thanks for joining us today. And make sure and join us next week as we bring Net Ally to the table. So, Anthony, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. And what a great discussion. Thank you so much to Will and Stacia for having that. I'm going to put a couple things in the chat here. First off, there it is our team alias. So Cyber Public Sector, you want to find out more about Barracuda, absolutely reach out to us. We would happy to get you set up with that. And then the second one that I'm going to send in the chat is a link that you can sign up for a cloud security assessment if you need to get that conversation rolling with your end users. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you next week as well.